The top 10 heavyweight fighters in boxing as of September 25. Hi, my name's Deidre Hamaguchi. I'm a pro fighter. I'm a former U.S. national judo champion, and I'm also a professional educator. The last time we did a top 10 heavyweight ranking was in April, so it's time to do a new update. And with all the exciting heavyweight fights that have been happening recently, there have been a few little switch-ups in the rankings. So to recap from April, here's who I had in the top 10. Well, the champion at the time was, and still is, Alexander Usyk. As number 1, we had Tyson Fury. Number 2, Daniel Dubois. Number 3, Joseph Parker. Number 3, Anthony Joshua. Number 4, Joseph Parker. Number 5, Ajit Kabayel. Number 6, Filip Hrgovic. Number 7, Zhang Jilei. Number 8, Martin Bakole. Number 9, Derek Chisora. And in the 10th slot, I had Justis Huni. If you'd like to check out that video, I will put a link to it in the description below. Now, before we move on to my updated ratings, I will also include the George Foreman definition of a heavyweight. So George Foreman once said that at a certain point in every heavyweight's career, they have to fight like a heavyweight. So what did George mean by that? Well, in my interpretation, he means that a heavyweight can't try to fight like a lightweight. They shouldn't be trying to use fancy footwork, throw blazing fast combinations, and use a ton of slick movement to showboat. A heavyweight has to have confidence in their punching power. A heavyweight knows that he or she can throw one punch and change the entire outcome of a fight. So for example, if you saw recently Fabio Wardley's fight versus Justis Huni, Justis was winning the fight quite handily over the course of 9 rounds. And then in the 10th, Fabio was able to turn the fight around completely with one punch, his right hand. If you recall historically, George Foreman did the same thing versus Michael Moore. And with that one punch, George Foreman regained the heavyweight title and arguably opened up a new chapter in his boxing career and in his life. So a George Foreman heavyweight doesn't have fancy footwork. They know how to sit down on their punches. That's how they use their footwork. They're not afraid to throw single hard shots with wild abandon, because they know that there's a potential reward to that risk. Now, there is a little bit of a twist to my rankings for this go around, and that's because some of the shenanigans, shall we say, that have been going on sort of behind the scenes a little bit. So for example, Tyson Fury, who I previously had as number 1, has said that he's retired, but he'll come out of retirement to fight Alexander in a 3rd fight. Now, in my opinion, when a fighter announces that they're retired, they get removed from the rankings. They don't get to be ranked number 1 on hold, or there's no interim number 1 rating, none of that. And I say that from the perspective as an athlete, because even for amateurs, we're highly aware of who's the number 1 person in our weight division, who's in all the other slots, 2, 3, 4, on down the line. So if somebody in the 2 or 3 slots says, hey, I'm retiring, or I'm moving up a weight division, then they get removed from the rankings. Everybody else gets to move up 1 slot. And that just means you have more opportunity as you move your way up in the rankings. So it's really not fair to create this sort of in-between ranking, like your number 1 interim, maybe if you get a fight with who you want. No, you're either ranked or you're not. So Tyson, you announced your retirement. I'm removing you from the rankings. Now, to add a twist to that, Eddie Hearn recently announced that AJ will make a comeback fight versus, as Eddie says, somebody in the top 15, and then AJ will fight Fury next summer, 26. Well, first of all, I don't know if Fury's up for that or down for that, but, Eddie, if you're going to play that game, then let's yank both of you out, because you guys can do your little sidebar competition off to the side. You don't need the rankings if those are the fights you want to make, right? Okay, and then to add to that, Zhang Jilei has stated that he's not going to retire until he gets to fight AJ. So if that's the fight you're after, Zhang, then I guess we get to pull you out of the ratings as well. Now, I mean, we could also say that all three of those fighters are in the later parts of their career. They might be only a few fights away from retirement, but that in and of itself is not a reason to pull them out of the ratings. I think the fact that they've basically announced who they want to fight next, I think, and then it's sort of that little triangle of the three of them, well, then have at it, guys. But you can do that over there off to the side. The whole point of being rated in the top 10 is fighters want to rise up to challenge for the title. So that's how I handled it. And what that does in effect is open up some slots in our top 10 ratings. So that being said, let's move forward and we'll talk about the top 5. So number 1, well, I had Daniel right behind Tyson, so he simply moves up. Yes, he did suffer a devastating loss to Alexander, but that doesn't mean he needs to tumble any further down in the ratings. So Daniel's now number 1. Right behind Daniel in the number 2 slot, I have Joseph Parker. Pardon me, let me backtrack. So does Daniel Dubois fight like a George Foreman heavyweight? Yes, he most certainly does. Daniel's willing to throw those hard shots, sometimes to a fault where he overshoots with his right hand and leaves himself open. But we know that he has those powerful punches. We know he's willing to throw single hard shots. He does sit down on them. So yes, he's a George Foreman heavyweight. In the number 2 slot, I have Joseph Parker. Joseph also fights like a George Foreman heavyweight. Take a look at his fight versus Deontay Wilder. Superb technical work, hard punches, knew exactly what to do. He didn't get the finish, but it was arguably the referee could have stepped in when Joseph had Deontay trapped in the corner and on the ropes. So Joseph Parker most definitely is a George Foreman heavyweight. Now, in my opinion, Joseph deserves the next shot at Alexander Usyk. Whether Team Usyk feels that that's an opponent they'd like to face or not, that's another story. But I really feel that Parker has more than earned that title shot. Now, I understand that he's going to face off with Fabio Wardley because Wardley has one of the belts, from my understanding. So, I mean, that's a worthy trinket, I suppose, that could then perhaps justify the winner of that matchup to challenge Usyk. We'll see how all of that plays out. But I'm really hoping that Parker gets a title shot sometime in 26. I feel that Joseph Parker has had a real renaissance with his boxing career and with his the technical aspects of his boxing under the tutelage of trainer Andy Lee. I feel that Joseph has just shown quite a bit of improvement over the course of his last few fights. Andy's got him not sort of leaning over his front foot with his lead hand down. He's got him a little more upright with a better guard and throwing reasonable combinations. So hats off to trainer Andy Lee for the work he's done with Joseph Parker, as well as Hamza Shiraz. On a side note, in the number 3 slot, I have Ajit Kabayel, and right behind him, in number 4, I have Filip Hrgović. Both of those heavyweights simply just moved up a slot with the absence of Fury and Zhang was behind them, but with the absence of Fury and AJ in our ratings. Now, I'm bullish on both Ajit and on Filip, again, because they've also shown me dramatic improvement over the last couple fights. So, for example, with Ajit, when I first started watching his fights, I was highly critical of his footwork and of his whole approach to the fight game, because he would simply walk around the perimeter of the ring in a counterclockwise manner. He'd look over his left shoulder towards his opponent, who was more towards the center of the ring. Ajit would dart in, try to land a punch or two, and then dart right back out and start walking around in circles again. And it was just like, come on, buddy, like, this is a fight. I don't know what you're doing, but that's not fighting. So to his credit, there's been a dramatic shift in how Ajit approaches things in the ring. His footwork has improved. He actually looks like he's coming to fight now. And he certainly showed that versus Zhang Jilei with that body shot stoppage victory. So I do look forward to seeing more out of Ajit over the course of the next year or two. Now, does Ajit fight like a George Foreman heavyweight? No, he does not. Not yet. Perhaps, I don't know if he switched up his trainer or how this shift in his technical and tactical aspects of his game came about, but perhaps whoever he's working with now can also help him start to sit down on his punches more. But it strikes me just from the way he started out that Ajit's more of a fellow who likes to move a lot and just be elusive rather than to sit down on his punches. So it remains to be seen. Now, number 4 with Filip Hrgović, I'm also very bullish on him, also because of the rejuvenation in his boxing with trainer Abel Sanchez. Now, Sanchez, you might remember, was Triple G's trainer. So Abel's an old school boxing trainer. It's all about fundamentals with most old school trainers. Whether you see them on TV or not, that doesn't mean they don't know what they're talking about, right? But any old school trainer, I would say that would be someone probably 65 and older. They stick to the basics and they want their fighters to stick to the basics. That means having solid footwork, coordinating your footwork with your punches, and throwing classic combinations to start with. They don't want you doing shoulder rolls. They don't want you showboating. They don't want you dropping your hands, any of that business. So I noticed a big difference with Filip Hrgović in his last outing versus David Adelaide. Filip was throwing classic combinations, starting with the jab, double jab, to the head, to the body. He was mixing up those combinations well. And I could tell that Abel Sanchez put him through his paces in training camp because as the fight wore on, you could tell that Hrgović had gone through some hard sparring sessions. Now, how do I know that? It's sort of a spidey sense, sixth sense, but you can literally see the mental wheels turning in a fighter's head as the fight progresses and gets to the second half of the fight where it's possible that you're going to now start to get a little bit tired. But do you have that mental fortitude to push through that? And did you do that in training camp? If you did, then there's more of a chance that you'll be able to do this in the actual fight. If you did not put in the hard rounds in training camp, you're just going to slowly start to fade away in those later rounds. And you can see that happen to athletes. Once they realize they're not physically there anymore, then mentally they start to fall apart as well. But I could tell that Hrgović was just strong throughout that whole fight, mentally and technically with his boxing. So props to Hrgović for listening to his trainer, and props to Abel Sanchez for knowing what his fighter needed in order to prepare properly. In the number 5 slot, I have one of my new favorites, which is Martin Bakole. Now, Bakole most definitely fights like a George Foreman heavyweight. He sits down on his punches, he throws hard shots, and just take a look at his fight versus Jared Anderson, whom he completely dismantled. Now, a number of folks thought that Anderson was just going to box Bakole, but Bakole wasn't having it. He had decent enough footwork to be able to stay on top of Anderson, close distance, to cut off the ring, and then to land much harder shots than Jared was able to land on him. Even in Bakole's most recent fight, which was a draw versus Efe Ajagba, look at the attitude that Bakole had in the ring. Ajagba basically took a page from the Devin Haney and Canelo William Scholes books. Those 3 fights were just really hard to watch. So, in other words, Efe decided to run around the ring during the second half of the fight. And unlike Haney's opponent and unlike Canelo, Martin took the right attitude. He got mad. You could tell he was angry that Efe was running around circles. He motioned to Efe, hey, come here and fight, let's fight. And when Efe wouldn't do that, Bakole then proceeded to do his best to cut off the ring. He went after him. That's what Haney's opponent wasn't willing to do, and Canelo wasn't willing to do that. Now, Why is that the case? And I think it's because when you're the pursuer, there's going to be a few moments where you look really uncoordinated because you're going to be swatting at air. That runner will definitely make you miss a couple of times. But if you just stay determined, you'll figure out their rhythm and their footwork, and eventually you'll be able to cut off the ring on them. But you have to be willing to look silly a little bit initially. And Bacoli just didn't care. I think Canelo cared too much about what he would look like hunting down School. Bacoli went after FA as best as he could and was able to eke out a draw. So I don't think that draw takes away from Bacoli at all. I have to give him credit for his attitude and the way he went after FA as best as he could. I also don't feel that Bacoli getting KO'd by Joseph Parker is a blemish on his record, truly, because he took that fight on such short notice. He effectively saved that fight for Turki Al-Sheikh. So I assume that only is, bodes well for him in the long run in his relationship with Turkey and fighting in Riyadh season. So I do look forward to seeing Martin Bacoli's next fight. Now, before we move on to the second half of our top 10, I'd like to take a moment to say thanks very much to everybody who's been following the channel and the breakdowns. I really appreciate everybody's comments. If you're somebody who loves to have discourse about boxing and combat sport, please consider joining our channel as a member. For under $3 a month, you get early access to much of the content. You get priority in terms of a reply from me in the comments. And you also get a cool little icon that'll show up next to your name in comments, on live streams, in the live chat. Of course, you can always support the channel via a super thanks or a super chat on a live stream. And please remember, every penny helps. So whatever you're willing to donate and whatever your budget allows, we truly appreciate it. Finally, if you'd like to have something in return for supporting our channel, you can always purchase merchandise like this tie-dye t-shirt. There's links in the description. There's links in a lot of the shorts that are posted to my spread shop store. There are also links to purchase some of my artwork on a separate website. So please consider checking those out. Most importantly, I appreciate everybody's positive comments and your interaction with everybody in the comments. So let's move on to 6 through 10. So in number 6, I have none other than the white collar boxing phenomenon, Fabio Wardley. I previously had Justice Huni in the number 10 slot, and I feel that with that one punch turnaround, Fabio earned himself not only a slot in the top 10, but in all fairness, I have to put him above Justice Huni, at least momentarily. We'll see how everything plays out. So Fabio's in the number 6 slot. Now, does he fight like a George Foreman heavyweight? Yes, he does. Fabio's not like technically slick by any means, but he does know how to sit down on his punches. And as he himself said after that fight with Justice, he may not be as technically skilled as Justice is, but Fabio said, but I do know how to win a fight. And that's exactly the spirit of what a George Foreman heavyweight is. Now, Fabio is currently matched up to fight Joseph Parker, whom, as I said, I feel deserves a shot at Alexander next. But let's see how this plays out between Fabio and Joseph. I have to say, it's quite incredible to me that somebody who came through the white-collar boxing route has made it into the top 10 heavyweight rankings, and deservedly so. I mean, nothing was handed to Fabio. He defeated Frazier Clark with that crazy first-round knockout, and now he's defeated Justice Huni. So he's faced valid opposition and come out victorious on the other end. So I look forward to seeing more from Fabio. In the number 7 slot, I put Justice Huni. Now, I don't feel that one punch KO is a huge blemish on his resume. I don't think that he deserves to be banished from the top 10. Justice is such a highly technical heavyweight, I think he definitely still remains in the top 10. I do have him underneath Fabio, so he's in number 7. Now, does Justice fight like a George Foreman heavyweight? I wouldn't say so. And that's not to take away from him. It's just that he relies so much on his footwork and his very technical combinations that we haven't seen him sit down and just throw hard bombs yet. That's not really part of his repertoire at the moment. So, and then that's okay, because look at who we have as undisputed. Alexander certainly does not fight like a George Foreman heavyweight, and he's the king of the heap, proven that on multiple occasions. Now, in the number 8, 9, and 10 slots, this might be somewhat controversial for more than a few fight fans and boxing analysts, but I'm going to go with what I've got nevertheless. So at number 8, I have Dillian Whyte. Yes, Dillian Whyte. Even though he got KO'd in the first round by Moses Italma, I don't feel like Dillian necessarily needs to be removed entirely from the top 10. And here's why. Take a look at his resume. Look at the opposition he's faced. He's put the time in. I feel that unfortunately for Dillian, when he was rated number 1, he never got that shot. Thanks to the WBC, he never got that shot at Deontay, and that certainly would have been an interesting matchup of styles. We could hypothesize as to whether, Team Wilder and the WBC were keeping Deontay away from Dillian, but nevertheless, I feel like he was kind of just put up on the shelf and allowed to sit there. Really wasn't fair in terms of, the fact that he'd earned that shot, but it was never given to him. And then when he did, he get the shot, it was versus Tyson Fury. So, we'll never get to see Dillian face off versus Deontay, but that was the fight that should have been made years ago. So it's a little bit sentimental on my part, but I also feel that Dillian, because of his ring resume, serves as a great, and I hate to use this word, gatekeeper for the top 10 heavyweights. I don't like to cast fighters in that role, but if you can't get past Dillian and the next fellow I have on the list, then you have to wonder if you should be in the top 10 at all. Does Dillian have a shot to make a run at Alexander? That's highly unlikely, but I do feel he has the ability to mix it up with the other heavyweights, say from 3 on downward, or maybe even with Dubois if he feels like it once again. Does Dillian fight like a George Foreman heavyweight? Most certainly he does, and that's kind of what makes him exciting, because he's willing to throw those single hard shots, leaves himself open. As we know, he's also able to take a hard shot, sometimes get dropped, look like he's losing the fight, and then turn the tide and come back, only to stop his opposition with one of his own single hard shots. So yes, Dillian, most certainly a George Foreman heavyweight. Now, in the number 9 slot, I have none other than our perennial favorite, and Dillian's perennial favorite as well, Del Boy, Derek Chisora. I think both of these guys are a lot of fun out of the ring as well as in the ring. And Derek, he's looked good in his last couple of outings. It has been announced that Derek is supposed to face off with Jai Obatai, who's currently, cruiserweight king. Jai is apparently making the move up to heavyweight, and so Derek is going to be the one to welcome him to the heavyweight division. So again, not that I want to label him as a gatekeeper, but that's kind of where I put him. If Jai can get past Derek, then he shows us that he deserves to be rated in the top 10 of the heavyweights right out the gate. Derek has announced that I think he only wants to fight a few more times and then he's going to retire. I think he said he wants his farewell fight in Africa or something like that. I'm not sure how serious he is about that. But again, take a look at Derek's resume, look at the opposition he's faced. If Jai can't get past Derek, then we have to move him back down, maybe top 20 heavyweights, but not top 10. So I think that'll be a very interesting fight. And Does Derek fight like a George Foreman heavyweight? Almost certainly. He's confident. He'll sit down on his punches. He'll throw one shot with wild abandon, and he's willing to do the risk reward on that. So, and as I said, I think both Derek and Dillian keep things interesting out of the ring as well. So good entertainment value. And both men always come to fight, which in the end is one of the most important factors for a heavyweight. Now, on a side note, as we say, notable in its absence are any American heavyweights in my top 10 list. And that's kind of what I just said. They don't come to fight. This is the topic for a whole separate video, a whole separate podcast as to why this is the case. The cliche, as goes heavyweight boxing, so goes boxing. Well, as goes American heavyweight boxing, so goes the state of boxing in the United States. And I think that holds true. But let's get back to our ratings. We've got one more slot to fill. That's the number 10 slot. And I have none other than Moses Itauma. So some will argue that with that incredible first round KO of Dillian, that Moses deserves to challenge Alexander Usyk. He's not ready for that yet. Or that he deserves to be ranked much higher in the top 10, like, 3, 4, or 4. I think some ratings have him like number 2, something like that. But no, he doesn't get to jump up that high. And here's why. I said in a sense that Moses is too good for his own good. And by that, I mean, he's so good that he gets his opposition out of there in 1 or 2 rounds. Now, that's terrific. It looks great on your record. You don't put yourself through a lot of wear and tear. You manage to KO somebody in 1 or 2 rounds, but it doesn't give you the ring experience you need to be a truly viable top 10 heavyweight. Because if you're in the top 10, you need to be ready to go a solid 12 rounds of a hard fight. And Moses just simply, I'm not saying he can't, but he hasn't put in that time inside the ropes, under the bright lights in the professional ranks to know that he can do that. You actually have to show and teach your body that you can physically do this. And then once you're physically able to do it, you mentally have the confidence to know you can do that. So just for fun, and for those who like to debate matters, I added up all of the total amount of time that Moses Itauma has spent inside the ropes in a professional fight for those 13 fights. Now, of those 13 fights, in only 2 cases was he extended a full 6 rounds. And that was versus 2 opponents. I don't think you'll recognize their names. They were 7 and 9 and 12 at the time. So that's the longest Moses has spent in the ring, 18 minutes. Okay, for one fight. So I added up all the fights. A lot of these were first round knockouts. So the total amount of time over 13 fights was 60 minutes and 53 seconds. So let's just round that up for the sake of argument to 61 minutes. Then if we divide 61 minutes by 13 fights, we wind up with 4 minutes and 42 seconds. So that means on average, Moses's fights last 1 round and then just over the halfway mark of the second round. Okay, that's not enough time to figure out how you're going to deal with a 12-round fight or even a 10-round fight tactically. It's not just a matter of being in condition and sparring a lot of rounds in your training camp, which you should be doing. You have to experience the duration of a fight in an actual fight setting, not sparring, in order to know how to handle yourself mentally and emotionally when that time comes. There's an aspect of pacing that starts to become innate once a fighter has done a series of 10-rounders and 12-rounders. And you can see this, you can see the difference between someone who's just doing a 10-rounder for the first time and another fighter who's done, say, a dozen 10-round fights. That the person with more experience knows exactly when they can sort of ease off a little bit, and then when they need to start pushing forward and step on the gas a little bit more. but they don't waste any energy and they don't let the fight get away from them, as we say. So this is a whole aspect of the fight game that Moses simply hasn't experienced yet. So while I feel that, yes, he's an incredibly exciting fighter, he's explosive, he's technically sound, he's got outstanding hand speed, and he's a southpaw, I don't feel he gets to jump the line. I don't feel like he's ready to challenge Usyk at all. So I'm happy to keep him at number 10, and that means he can challenge anybody from 9 through 1 if he likes. But I think he needs a few fights at a much higher caliber before he can challenge for the title. So there's my top 10 heavyweight fighters for September 25. Who do you have in your top 10? I want to give a real shout out to Shug, one of our viewers, who took the time to type out all of his top 10 heavyweights, and he also explained why he ranked them where he ranked them. You can check out his extensive comment in one of the previous videos I made. So I really appreciate your input, Shug, and I think we're mostly in agreement. I did pull that little trick where I yanked out 3 fighters, so that's where I think the difference lies. But I'm always happy when viewers like you leave their comments, leave their opinions in the comments. It just adds to our discourse. So thank you so much for taking the time and effort to do that. So let me know who you have in your top 10. Let me know which heavyweight fights you're looking forward to as 25 comes to a close and as we move into 26. Do you think there's anybody who can snatch the crown from Alexander Usyk? How long before you think Moses Itauma jumps all the way up? Do you think he's destined to become the next heavyweight champion of the world? I want to hear from all of you, so please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you.